The rhythmic, mechanical hiss of the oxygen machine was the only sound in the pediatric ICU. To Erica Mitchell, it sounded like a ticking clock. She sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside the hospital bed, her fingers gently brushing the damp hair away from her brother's pale forehead. At 10 years old, Toby was supposed to be scraping his knees playing soccer, not lying in a sterile room with wires taped to his fragile chest. His skin had a ghostly translucent quality under the harsh fluorescent lights and the dark circles under. His eyes made him look far older than he was. Erica? Toby's voice was a dry, raspy whisper. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing tired brown eyes that mirrored her own. "I'm right here, buddy," she murmured, forcing a bright, reassuring smile that didn't reach her eyes. She squeezed his small, frail hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," he admitted while shifting slightly against the stiff hospital pillows. He looked at her rumpled clothes, the faded jeans and the oversized sweater she'd been practically living in for 3 days. "Do you have to go to work?" Erica swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. The medical bills stacked on her kitchen counter at home totaled more than she could make in 10 lifetimes working her 3 minimum wage jobs. The hospital administration had been sympathetic but firm. Without the exorbitant deposit for the specialized pediatric heart surgeon, Toby wouldn't get the transplant list priority he desperately needed. Time was out. "I do," she said, keeping her voice steady and light. "Actually, I got a new job, a really good one. It's executive event planning, corporate stuff. It pays incredibly well, Tobes. It's going to cover everything. The surgery, the recovery, all of it." Toby managed a weak smile. "That's awesome. Does that mean you won't look so sad all the time?" A tear escaped, tracking hot down her cheek, before she could furiously wipe it away. "I'm not sad, Toby. I'm just happy we finally got a break. But I have to go to a big event tonight, so I will be out late. Mrs. Higgins from down the hall is going to come sit with you, okay?" "Okay. Will you visit tomorrow, Erica?" "Always," she whispered, leaning down to press a lingering kiss to his forehead. "I love you past the moon, kiddo." "Past the stars," he whispered back, the old routine comforting them both before his eyes drifted shut again. Leaving the room felt like tearing a piece of her soul away. Erica walked down the sterile corridor, her vision blurring until she pushed through the heavy wooden door of the public restroom on the ground floor. She locked the door behind her and stared into the mirror. The woman looking back was exhausted, desperate and terrified. But she didn't have time to be that woman anymore. With shaking hands, Erica unzipped her duffel bag. Inside lay the armor the agency had provided. She stripped off her comfortable, worn clothes and pulled on the dress. It was a deep red silk that clung to her curves, plunging dangerously low in the back. It felt cold and alien against her skin, a tangible reminder of what she was selling. She opened the small makeup bag. Foundation to cover the exhaustion. Mascara to widen her eyes, and finally a bold blood-red lipstick. She applied it like war paint. As she slipped her feet into the agonizingly high stilettos, the transformation was complete. The desperate sister was gone. Buried beneath the polished, expensive veneer of a high-priced companion, her burner phone buzzed in the silk clutch. Single text message: "Car is out front." Erica took one last trembling breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed out of the bathroom. She walked through the sliding glass doors of the hospital lobby and out into the muggy night air. Idling at the curb was a sleek, pitch-black town car with tinted windows. The driver was a mountain of a man in a sharp suit, opened the rear door without a word. Erica climbed into the luxurious, leather-scented interior, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. The door slammed shut with a heavy, definitive thud, sealing her inside. As the car pulled away from the curb, carrying her toward the penthouse of Lucian Morelli, Erica stared out the tinted window at the receding lights of the hospital, praying that she would survive the night and not mess this up. Too much was at risk. Lucian Morelli stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring down at the sprawling, glittering grid of the city. From 30 stories up, the violence and chaos of the streets he controlled were invisible. Up here, it was just quiet. He took a slow sip of his amber bourbon, letting the burn ground him. It had been a brutal week. The fallout from a botched shipment on the docks had required his personal heavy-handed intervention, and the blood was metaphorically still under his fingernails. He hadn't called the agency for sex. He had called them because he needed an hour, or two, where he didn't have to be the ruthless head of the Morelli syndicate. He needed human interaction that didn't require more than he was willing to give. The underground agency was exclusive, discreet, and strictly professional. The madame had promised him her newest acquisition, someone polished, compliant, and experienced enough to know the golden rules. Don't ask questions. Don't look around and take the envelope on the table when you leave. No emotional labor required. The heavy oak door to his private office opened, and his underboss Enzo stepped in. The imposing man didn't cross the threshold, merely tapped his knuckles against the doorframe. Boss. The car just pulled into the private garage, Enzo rumbled, his dark eyes scanning the room out of pure habit. Security cleared her downstairs. She's getting in the elevator now. Lucian gave a curt nod, not turning away from the window. Make sure the perimeter is locked down for the night, Enzo. No interruptions unless the warehouse is actually on fire. Understood. Enzo closed the door, leaving Lucian alone in the cavernous, dimly lit living space. Lucian set his glass down on the marble bar. He adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt, his muscles coiled with a residual tension he couldn't quite shake. He expected a seasoned operator to walk through those doors. A woman hardened by the luxury nightlife, dripping with manufactured confidence and rehearsed seduction. The soft melodic chime of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse. Lucian turned his expression carefully blank, his posture exuding absolute predatory control. The brushed steel doors slid apart with a soft hiss. The woman who stepped out into his foyer did not look confident. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. Lucian's eyes narrowed instantly, his razor-sharp instincts flaring. He catalogued every detail in a fraction of a second. The red silk dress was expensive, clearly provided by the agency, but she wore it like a straitjacket. The bold red lipstick was applied perfectly, yet it couldn't hide the fact that her bottom lip was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. But it was her eyes that made his blood run cold. They were wide, frantic, and dilated with pure, unadulterated fear. She clutched a tiny silk purse in front of her like a shield, her knuckles stark white. As her gaze swept over the soundproofed walls, the heavy security locks, and finally landed on him, she physically recoiled, letting out a hitched, suppressed gasp. This wasn't the subtle practiced submission of a high-end escort. This was the raw, primal panic of prey that had just been dropped into a cage with a monster. "Good evening," Lucian said, his baritone voice intentionally low, trying not to spook her further. She flinched at the sound of his voice. "Hello, Mr. Morelli." Her voice was a melodic but broken whisper. She took a single wobbly step forward on stilettos she clearly wasn't used to wearing. Her ankle rolled slightly, and she caught herself against the wall, squeezing her eyes shut as if bracing for a blow. A cold, dark fury began to simmer in Lucian's chest. Not at her, but at the madam who had sent her. The agency had promised him a seasoned professional. The woman standing trembling in his foyer was a civilian, an amateur, a terrified girl pushed entirely out of her depth. He didn't know what kind of leverage or threat had forced her to put on that dress and step into his elevator, but looking at the absolute desperation radiating from her, Lucian knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to touch her. But he was going to find out exactly who forced her into his den. "Take off your shoes," Lucian commanded softly, taking a slow step toward her. Erica's breath hitched, a tear instantly spilling over her lashes as her hands flew to the straps of her heels. "Not for me," Lucian added quickly, stopping in his tracks when he saw the look of pure terror on her face. "Take them off, because you're in pain and you're safe here. Now tell me your name." Erica froze. Safe. The word felt like a trap. The handler at the agency had warned her that some of the high-paying clients liked to play mind games, that they liked to break down their companions before taking what they wanted. If she showed weakness now, if she let him send her away out of pity, the agency would withhold the money. Toby's surgeon would cancel the procedure in the morning. She couldn't let that happen. She would endure anything for Toby, with a jerky, mechanical movement. Erica kicked the agonizing stilettos aside. Her bare feet sank into the plush Persian rug, but she didn't allow herself to retreat. Instead, she forced her trembling chin up, plastering on a hollow, desperate imitation of a seductive smile. "My name is whatever you want it to be," she said, reciting the line she had rehearsed in the mirror 100 times. Her voice shook on the syllables, betraying the manufactured purr she was aiming for. She forced herself to close the distance between them. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to run from the towering, dangerous man in front of her, but she walked directly into his personal space. Raising a hand that felt as heavy as lead, she pressed her palm flat against the solid, muscular wall of his chest, right over his heart. Beneath the crisp cotton of his shirt, Lucian was perfectly still, radiating a dangerous heat. "I know what I'm doing," Erica whispered frantically, her eyes darting to his mouth and back to his dark, unreadable eyes. She slid her hand a fraction of an inch upward, her fingers completely ice-cold. "I'm here for you. Just tell me what you want me to do." Lucian looked down at the pale, slender hand resting against his chest. He could feel the violent, uncontrollable tremors vibrating through her entire arm. He could see the pulse jumping wildly at the base of her throat, beating with the frantic rhythm of a trapped bird. With a movement so fast Erica barely registered it, Lucian's large hand snapped up, wrapping around her wrist. She gasped, squeezing, her eyes shut and bracing for the violence she was certain was coming. But his grip wasn't crushing. It was unyielding, firmly pulling her hand away from his chest, but there was no pain. He kept her wrists suspended between them, his thumb resting over her racing pulse. "Stop!" Lucian commanded. The gentle, coaxing tone was gone, replaced by a cold, absolute authority that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. "Open your eyes." Erica obeyed, her chest heaving, fresh tears pooling in her eyes. "You don't know what you're doing," he stated, flatly, his dark eyes stripping away every layer of her pathetic disguise. "You are scared. You are forcing yourself to touch me, and you look like you're about to pass out. So I am going to ask you one time, and you are going to tell me the absolute truth. Why did you sign with the agency?" "Because I need the money." The truth ripped out of her on a sob, her carefully constructed facade shattering into a million jagged pieces. She tried to pull her wrist back, but he held her fast. "Please, Mr. Morelli, please don't send me back. I will do whatever you want. I promise I won't cry anymore. I need the money tonight. If the wire transfer doesn't hit the hospital's account by midnight, my little brother loses his spot on the transplant list. He'll die." Lucian went incredibly still. The silence in the penthouse stretched thick and suffocating as the gravity of her words settled over them. A transplant list. A dying brother. The underground agency hadn't just sent him an amateur. They had weaponized a desperate girl's tragedy to make a profit. A dark, murderous rage ignited in Lucian's blood. A lethal, icy fury directed entirely at the madame who had dared to put this broken, brave woman in his path. Slowly and very deliberately, Lucian released her wrist. He took a half step back, giving her air. "What is his name?" Lucian asked, his voice deathly quiet. "Toby," she stammered, wiping at her ruined mascara, entirely bewildered by the sudden shift in the room's energy. "He's 10. Lucian held her gaze. For a long moment, seeing the fierce, unwavering love that had driven her into a monster's den. Without breaking eye contact, he reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket and retrieved a sleek black cell phone. He dialed a single digit and put it on speaker. It rang twice before a woman's polished, overly sweet voice filled the silent foyer. "Mr. Morelli, I trust the new acquisition is to your liking?" Erica whimpered, recognizing her handler's voice. She wrapped her arms around herself, certain he was calling to demand a refund. "Listen to me very carefully, madame," Lucian said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly register that made the hair on the back of Erica's neck stand up. "You are going to initiate a wire transfer to whatever hospital account this girl gave you. You are going to send the full required amount plus 20%. "Sir, I don't understand the standard rate." "I am not paying your standard rate," Lucian interrupted, the quiet menace in his tone paralyzing. I am buying her contract. Permanently. Erase her name from your books, delete her files, and if anyone from your organization ever approaches her or her family again, I will burn your entire operation to the ground with you inside it. Do we have an understanding? A heavy, terrified pause hung on the line. Yes, Mr. Morelli, immediately. Lucian ended the call and tossed the phone onto a nearby marble table. He turned his attention back to Erica, who was staring at him in absolute stunned disbelief. Your brother's surgery is paid for, Lucian said smoothly, as if he hadn't just altered the entire trajectory of her life in 60 seconds. But you belong to me now. Let's go get you something to eat. Erica didn't move. She stood rooted to the plush rug, her bare toes curling into the fibers, staring at the back of Lucian's broad shoulders as he casually turned toward the expansive living area. I don't believe you, she whispered. Lucian stopped. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The dangerous aura that had receded a fraction of an inch slammed right back into place. Excuse me? I don't believe you, Erica repeated, her voice shaking, though she somehow found the courage to speak louder. She wrapped her arms tightly around her ribs, holding her own trembling body together. People who buy other human beings don't just give away that kind of money out of the goodness of their hearts. This is a trick. It's some sick psychological game to get me to lower my guard. Lucian turned fully around, sliding his hands into the pockets of his tailored trousers. He didn't look angry. He looked fascinatingly still. A game, he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue with a dangerous silkiness. Yes. A tear spilled over her lashes, ruining what was left of her makeup. You want me to think he's safe, so I will be compliant. But I know how this works. Tomorrow morning, the agency will call the hospital and cancel the transfer, and Toby will be back at the bottom of the list, and I will be stuck here. She was hyperventilating now, the adrenaline of the confrontation crashing into the sheer, agonizing exhaustion of her reality. I won't let you play with his life. I will do whatever you want willingly. Just don't lie to me about my brother. Lucian's jaw tightened. He held her frantic gaze for 3 long seconds. Then without a word, he pulled his phone back out of his pocket. Which hospital? He demanded, his tone leaving absolutely no room for hesitation. Memorial Pediatric, she stammered, thrown off balance by his sudden action. Lucian tapped the screen, a few times, his thumb moving with practiced speed. He brought the phone to his ear, waiting in silence. A moment later, he spoke. I need the night administrator for the pediatric cardiac wing, now. He paused, his eyes never leaving Erica's. This is Lucian Morelli. I am calling to verify the financial status of a patient, Toby Mitchell. Erica's breath hitched. She watched, paralyzed, as Lucian listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. His expression gave absolutely nothing away. I see, Lucian murmured. And his status on the surgical schedule? He nodded once, then pulled the phone away from his ear. He didn't hang up. Instead, he closed the distance between them with 3 long, purposeful strides. He held the phone out to her. Listen, he commanded softly. Erica's hand trembled so violently, she could barely grasp the device. She pressed it to her ear, her eyes wide and terrified as she looked up at the towering dawn. Hello, she managed to whisper. Ms. Mitchell? It was the exhausted but familiar voice of Mrs. Gable, the night administrator she had been begging for an extension just hours ago. Is that you? Honey, I was just about to try your cell phone. Mrs. Gable, what's happening? Is Toby okay? Toby is sleeping like a log, sweetheart. But Ms. Mitchell, a wire transfer just cleared our accounts. An anonymous trust just paid Toby's surgical deposit in full. And while they didn't just pay the deposit, they paid the entire projected balance for the transplant, the ICU recovery, and 3 years of outpatient physical therapy. The penthouse seemed to tilt on its axis. The roaring in Erica's ears drowned out the faint hum of the city below. I've already paged the chief of surgery, Mrs. Gable continued, her voice thick with happy tears. Toby is officially at the top of the priority list As soon as a donor heart is a match, he's going straight into the OR. You did it, Erica. I don't know how, but you did it. Erica couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering loudly against the marble floor. It wasn't a game. It wasn't a trick. Toby was safe. Her little brother was going to live. The realization hit her system like a physical blow. For 3 years, she had carried the crushing, impossible weight of Toby's life on her shoulders. Now, in the span of 10 minutes, the weight had been completely obliterated by a cold-blooded syndicate boss. The strings holding her upright instantly snapped. Her knees buckled beneath her. She didn't hit the floor. Before she could even register, the fall Lucian was there. His strong arms wrapped around her waist, hauling her flush against his chest. He caught her with effortless strength, absorbing her dead weight as a ragged soul-deep sob finally ripped from her throat. Erica buried her face into the crisp cotton of his shirt, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket like a drowning woman, clinging to a life raft. She broke down, completely weeping with the violent, uninhibited force of a woman who had finally been allowed to stop fighting. Lucian didn't push her away. He didn't speak. He simply adjusted his grip, one large hand holding her firmly by the waist while the other moved up to cradle the back of her head. He tucked her against his chest, standing like a solid, immovable pillar in the center of the penthouse, letting her soak his designer shirt with her tears while he silently stood guard over her shattered pieces. The storm of Erica's tears slowly began to subside, leaving her gasping and trembling against the solid warmth of Lucian's chest. The scent of him was a sharp, intoxicating blend of scotch and something undeniably dangerous, anchored her in the present. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing, suffocating grip of panic around her throat was gone. In its place was a profound, hollow stillness, quickly filling with an overwhelming tide of gratitude that defied logic or reason. Slowly, her hands relaxed their desperate death grip on his lapels. She tilted her head back, her breathing still, ragged. Lucian looked down at her. His expression remained carefully guarded, but his dark eyes were intense, tracking every micro-expression on her tear-stained face. He expected her to step back. He expected her to apologize, to shrink away from him now that the reality of her situation, that she was alone in a penthouse with a crime boss, had time to set back in. She didn't step back. Erica looked up at the complicated, beautiful man who had just handed her a miracle. The harsh lines of his face, the lethal stillness of his posture. None of it mattered. In that single suspended moment, he wasn't a monster or a mafia boss. He was her savior. He was the only person in the world who had caught her when she fell. Moved by an instinct older and deeper than fear, Erica slid her hands up from his lapels, her palms smoothing over the broad expanse of his shoulders, before her fingers tentatively tangled in the dark, soft hair at the nape of his neck. Lucian went entirely rigid. Every muscle in his body locked down, a predatory reflex triggered by the sudden, intimate touch. Erica ignored the tension. She rose onto her tiptoes, leaning her weight fully against him, and pressed her lips softly to his. It wasn't the rehearsed kiss of a paid companion. It was impossibly gentle, a reverent offering of pure, unadulterated devotion. She kissed him as if he were the center of her universe, as if he were a long-lost love she had crossed oceans to find. Her lips parted with a soft sigh, tasting the salt of her own tears on his skin, pouring every ounce of her shattered soul and boundless gratitude into the connection. For a torturous second, Lucian did absolutely nothing. His hands remained frozen at her waist. A man who dealt in violence, leverage, cold transactions. He was entirely unequipped for this. He had been seduced 1,000 times, but he had never been worshipped. The absolute purity of her kiss bypassed every impenetrable wall he had built around himself, striking directly at the black-hardened core of his heart. It broke him. A low, involuntary sound. Something between a growl and a surrender vibrated deep, in Lucian's chest. Suddenly, his hands were no longer just holding her up. They were claiming her. One hand slid up her spine, his long fingers threading into her hair to angle her head, while his other arm wrapped crushingly around her waist, pulling her flush against his hips. He kissed her back. The restraint he had shown vanished, replaced by a fierce, demanding intensity that took Erica's breath away. He devoured her mouth, parting her lips with his own, tasting the sweetness beneath her tears. It was a kiss that possessed, a kiss that marked territory. Yet beneath the bruising dominance, there was a shocking, desperate hunger. He kissed her, as if he needed the light she carried just as much as she had needed his darkness. Erica melted completely into him, her knees weak all over again, entirely consumed by the blinding heat of the man holding her. The sprawling, glittering city below them faded into nothingness. In the silence of the penthouse, the contract, the agency, and the dangerous world outside ceased to exist. When Lucian finally reluctantly pulled away, they were both breathless. He didn't let her go. He rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed, his chest rising and falling heavily against hers. "You have no idea what you just did," Lucian murmured, his voice a ragged dark whisper that sent a shiver straight down her spine. He opened his eyes, and the absolute possessiveness in his gaze pinning her in place. "But there is no going back now. You belong to me." The words hung in the air, dark and absolute, echoing in the quiet expanse of the penthouse. Erica's heart hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against her ribs. She was still wrapped in Lucian's arms, her senses entirely overwhelmed by the scent of him and the bruising, desperate heat of his kiss. Then the spell was violently broken. 3 heavy, urgent knocks hammered against the solid oak doors of the penthouse foyer. Lucian didn't flinch, but the shift in his body was instantaneous. The warmth and vulnerability that had just bled into the space between them vanished in a fraction of a second. The man who had been holding her like a lifeline turned to stone, his muscles coiled with lethal tension, and the dark eyes that had just burned with raw hunger went flat cold and entirely dead. He released her waist, stepping back and smoothly adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket. In the blink of an eye, the savior was gone, and the leader of the city's underworld returned. "Enter," Lucian commanded, his voice a sharp crack of authority. The heavy doors swung open. The mountain of a man Erica had seen earlier. His underboss Enzo stepped inside. Enzo's face was grim, his dark eyes flickering to Erica for only a microsecond before locking onto his boss. "We have a problem," Enzo rumbled, his hand resting casually but purposefully near the bulge under his tailored jacket. "Report," Lucian snapped. "It's the wire transfer to Memorial Pediatric," Enzo explained, stepping further into the room. "The madame processed the buyout, but the sudden movement of that much capital through the secondary shell accounts tripped a wire. The Falcone syndicate has been monitoring that specific routing node since the docks dispute last month. They flagged the drop." Erica's breath caught in her throat. She shrank back, wrapping her arms around herself. Falcone syndicate, secondary shell accounts. The words felt like they belonged in a movie, but the deadly seriousness in Enzo's voice made the blood freeze in her veins. Lucian's jaw tightened into a rigid line. "They know where the money landed?" "They know it hit a civilian hospital, boss," Enzo confirmed. "They don't know who the patient is yet, but they have eyes on the administration's network. They know you just dropped millions to protect a civilian. To them, that looks like a vulnerability. It looks like leverage." The room seemed to spin. Erica pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Leverage. They were talking about Toby. Her sweet 10-year-old brother hooked up to machines in a sterile room entirely defenseless. "No," Erica whispered, panic clawing its way back up her throat. She stepped forward, ignoring Enzo entirely, her terrified gaze fixed on Lucian. "Lucian, please. Toby." "Quiet," Lucian ordered, not raising his voice, but the sheer dominating weight of the word pinned her to the spot. He didn't look at her. His brilliant tactical mind was already moving 10 steps ahead of his enemies. He turned to Enzo, his eyes flashing with a terrifying, violent promise. Lock down the penthouse. Nobody in or out without my explicit clearance. Lucian fired off. Then get Marcus and a heavily armed 4-man detail down to Memorial Pediatric immediately. They are to secure Toby Mitchell's room, the hallway, and the elevator bank. If anyone from the Falcone family so much as breathes on that floor, I want them put in the ground. Clear? Crystal boss, I'm on it. Enzo gave a sharp nod, turning on his heel and striding out the door, already barking orders into a radio. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, plunging the foyer back into silence. Erica was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. The fairy tale illusion of her rescue had just been violently shattered. She hadn't just been saved. She had been pulled directly into the crossfire of a Mafia war. Lucian finally turned back to look at her. The icy, calculating dawn was still firmly in place, but as he took in her pale, terrified face, a flicker of that fierce, obsessive protectiveness flared back to life in his eyes. He crossed the distance between them, stopping mere inches away. He didn't touch her, but his commanding presence enveloped her entirely. I told you that you are safe here, and I meant it, Lucian said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register that left no room for doubt. Toby is under my protection now. The Falcones will have to burn this entire city to ash before I let them touch a single hair on his head. Or yours. Erica stared at him, her chest heaving. The sheer gravitational weight of his promise hung between them, but it wasn't enough. For 3 years, her entire existence had been defined by being at Toby's side whenever things went wrong. She was his sister, his guardian, his only family. She couldn't just stand in a glass tower while heavily armed men surrounded his hospital bed. The paralyzing fear shattered, replaced instantly by a fierce maternal adrenaline. I have to go to him, Erica said, her voice shaking but gaining volume. She spun away from Lucian, her bare feet patting frantically across the marble floor toward the spot where she had kicked off her heels. I need my shoes. Where is my bag? I have to go right now. She snatched the stilettos from the rug, her fingers fumbling blindly with the delicate straps. A large, warm hand clamped down over hers, easily prying the shoes from her grip and tossing them aside. Erica gasped, her head snapping up. Lucian had moved with terrifying speed, planting his broad-tailored frame squarely between her and the private elevator. He looked like an immovable monolith of dark silk and lethal intent. You are not going anywhere. Lucian stated, his voice devoid of the tenderness from just moments before. It was the voice of a dawn issuing an absolute command. Get out of my way. Erica demanded, her voice cracking. She tried to step around him, but he merely shifted his stance, blocking her path effortlessly. Lucian, move. You don't understand. He gets terrified when he wakes up alone in that room. He needs me. He needs to stay alive. Lucian countered, his tone flat and unyielding. And the best way to ensure that happens is for you to stay exactly where you are. He's my brother, Erica yelled, slapping her palms against his solid chest, trying in vain to push him backward. It was like trying to shove a brick wall. I've protected him his whole life. You can't just lock me in here while he's in danger. Lucian's hands shot out, wrapping securely around her wrists. He didn't hurt her, but his grip was ironclad, stopping her frantic struggles instantly. He pulled her slightly closer, forcing her to look up into his dark, storm-filled eyes. You protected him from a broken medical system, Erica, Lucian said, his voice dropping to a harsh, tactical whisper. You cannot protect him from a cartel hit squad. If you walk into that hospital right now, you are drawing a straight, undeniable line from me to you, to that boy. The Falcones are looking for a weakness. If they see you frantic and running to a pediatric ward, they won't just monitor the room. They will level the entire floor. Erica stopped fighting the horrific logic of his words, crashing over her like ice water. My men are professionals. Lucian continued, his thumb unconsciously smoothing over her racing pulse point. They will secure the perimeter. They will keep him safe. But you stepping foot outside this penthouse makes you a moving target, and I am not going to let anyone put a bullet in you. Erica stared up at him, her breathing ragged, the last remnants of her adrenaline bleeding out of her. She looked at the heavy steel doors of the elevator behind him, and then back at the man who had just bought her life. The realization settled over her with terrifying clarity. He had saved her brother. He had kissed her like she was the only woman on earth, but he was still a dictator in a violent empire. She wasn't a guest in this penthouse. She was a captive. So this is it, she whispered, her voice hollow. You paid the debt and now I'm just locked up. Lucian's jaw tightened. He didn't like the defeated, broken look in her eyes, but he wouldn't compromise on her safety. This is it, he agreed softly, releasing her wrists but not stepping aside. Your world just got very small, Erica, but you are going to survive it. The fight drained out of Erica, leaving behind a hollow, ringing silence. She didn't argue further. She simply turned away from the heavy steel elevator doors and walked on numb, bare feet toward the massive sectional sofa in the center of the living room. She sank into the plush cushions. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. She tried to make herself as small as possible in the cavernous and eerily quiet penthouse. She was trapped. Lucian watched the absolute defeat settle over her delicate frame, a muscle feathered along his tight jaw. He was a man who demanded submission and broke his enemies without a second thought. However, the sight of her crumbling under his authority felt like ash in his mouth. He hadn't bought her to break her. He turned without a word and strode down the long hallway toward his private office. Erica squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. She pictured Toby waking up in the sterile hospital room, looking around for her and finding only strange men with guns. The image made her stomach twist violently. The quiet, deliberate sound of Lucian's footsteps returned a few minutes later. Erica braced herself, pressing her forehead against her knees. She remained unwilling to look at her captor. Take this. His voice was a low, quiet rumble. Erica flinched but slowly lifted her head. Lucian stood beside the sofa, holding out a sleek, heavy-duty tablet encased in black rubber armor. Her trembling fingers reached out hesitantly and took the device. The illuminated screen displayed a high-definition video feed. Erica let out a choked gasp. It was Toby's hospital room. The dimmed lights still allowed her to clearly see her little brother asleep in the center of the bed. The rhythmic rise and fall of his chest remained steady and calm. The camera panned slightly, revealing the massive, intimidating frame of Enzo in the corner of the screen. He leaned against the wall near the door with his arms crossed over his massive chest. His harsh features were surprisingly relaxed as he looked down at the sleeping boy. Boss. Enzo's hushed and respectful voice came through the tablet speakers. All quiet. The perimeter is completely locked down. The kid hasn't stirred once. Thank you, Enzo, Lucian said, keeping his eyes completely fixed on Erica's face. Keep the feed open. Erica stared at the screen, brushing her thumbs gently over the glass right where Toby's sleeping face appeared. A solitary tear tracked down her cheek. This time it wasn't born of terror. It was pure, unadulterated relief. She watched for a long time, mesmerized by the steady, safe rhythm of Toby's breathing. She also witnessed the undeniable reality of the armed mountain of a man guarding him. No one was getting through that hospital door. Erica wasn't the only one standing between her brother and the abyss for the first time in years. She slowly looked up from the glowing screen. Lucian still stood over her with his hands tucked casually into his tailored pockets. His dark, eyes watched her with a quiet, intense vigilance. He had not compromised her safety yet. He had bent his own unyielding rules to give her the one thing she needed most. He gave her proof. I won't let anything happen to him, Lucian murmured. The deadly promise felt softer this time and wrapped around her bruised heart. Erica swallowed hard while her grip tightened on the heavy tablet. The anger and panic finally receded, leaving behind a complex, terrifying awe for the monster who had just handed her a lifeline. I know, she whispered. Erica held the tablet tight against her chest. The steady rise and fall of Toby's breathing on the screen grounded her. The adrenaline finally began to ebb away, leaving her limbs feeling heavy and useless. She leaned her head back against the plush cushions of the sofa. A sharp electronic buzz shattered the quiet. Lucian retrieved a sleek black phone from his inner jacket pocket. He read the encrypted message. The subtle softening around his eyes vanished instantly. The temperature in the penthouse seemed to drop 10 degrees. Problem. he stated flatly. The single word held a lethal weight. Erica sat up straight, her heart accelerating again. Is it Toby? Toby is completely secure, Lucian assured her, his dark eyes locking onto hers to cement the truth. Enzo intercepted a Falcone scout trying to access the pediatric floor. The scout is in our custody now. He is refusing to speak to my men. Lucian turned away and walked toward a hidden panel in the wall. He pressed his hand against a scanner. The panel slid open, revealing a hidden armory. Erica watched in horrified fascination as the gentle man who had just handed her a digital lifeline transformed completely. He removed his tailored suit jacket and draped it over a chair. He strapped a leather shoulder holster over his crisp white shirt. He checked the magazine of a heavy black handgun with practiced terrifying efficiency before sliding it into the leather sheath. He was gearing up for violence. He was preparing to break a man. I have to handle this interrogation personally, Lucian said. His voice was completely devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a monster. My personal guard detail is stationed outside, the penthouse doors. No one gets in. Do not open the doors for anyone. He walked back toward her. He stopped just inches away, radiating a dark, lethal energy. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was shockingly gentle against her skin. Get some sleep, Erica, he commanded softly. He turned and strode out of the penthouse. The heavy steel doors locked firmly behind him. Erica sat alone in the massive silent room. She clutched the tablet tightly. She stared at the empty space where the cold-blooded killer had just stood. She finally realized the terrifying magnitude of the deal she had made. She belonged to a monster. Several hours passed in absolute silence. The digital clock glowing on the kitchen appliance read 3 a.m. when the heavy elevator doors finally opened. Lucian stepped into the dim foyer. He looked completely exhausted. The lethal energy he carried earlier had burned away entirely. He walked slowly under the soft overhead lights. Erica gasped softly. His crisp white shirt was ruined. Dark crimson blood stained the cuffs and splattered across his chest. His knuckles were bruised raw and split open. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her sitting there. His dark eyes hardened instantly. He expected her to scream. He fully expected her to run away in absolute terror from the monster standing in his own foyer. He waited for the inevitable look of pure disgust to cross her beautiful face. Erica did not scream. She set the tablet down carefully on the glass coffee table. She stood up on shaking legs. She did not run away from him. She walked past the dangerous Dawn without a single word. She went straight into the adjoining powder room. She turned on the sink and grabbed a thick white hand towel. She soaked the fabric in warm water and wrung it out completely. She walked back into the foyer holding the warm cloth. Lucian remained frozen in the exact same spot. He watched her every movement with intense, guarded suspicion. Sit down, Erica commanded softly. Her voice held a surprising quiet strength. Lucian stared at her. He slowly lowered his massive frame onto the edge of a sleek leather chair near the entryway. He kept his dark eyes locked intensely onto hers. Erica knelt on the cold marble floor right in front of him. She reached out tentatively and took his massive bruised hands into her own. She began to wipe away the dark dried blood using the warm damp towel. She worked methodically, cleaning his knuckles with incredible gentleness. The warm damp towel turned pink. Erica focused entirely on the raw skin over his knuckles. She refused to look up into his dark eyes. The violent reality of his night hung heavily in the quiet space between them. Lucian let out a ragged breath. The adrenaline crash hit him hard. He felt completely untethered. He lived his entire life in a state of constant, brutal control. The soft touch of her hands unraveling that control left him feeling entirely lost. Erica finally looked up. She saw the profound exhaustion etched deeply into his harsh features. She recognized that specific weariness. It was the same intense fatigue she carried every single day while fighting for Toby. They were both fighting impossible battles alone. She dropped the ruined towel onto the floor. She slowly leaned forward. Lucian caught her face in his clean hands. He pulled her up off the floor and directly into his lap. He pressed his mouth against hers. The kiss held a desperate, searching quality. They were two lost souls seeking shelter. Erica wrapped her arms tightly around his broad shoulders. She clung to him as if the floor had vanished beneath them. They kissed each other deeply, trying to find an anchor in the dark storm. His large hands moved down her spine. He pulled her hips flush against his own. The intense heat of his body burned right through his ruined shirt. Erica gasped softly against his lips. Her fingers tangled fiercely in his dark hair. Lucian suddenly tore his mouth away. His chest heaved violently as he rested his forehead against hers. He forced himself to stop before things went too far. He wanted to claim her entirely, but he knew she was emotionally shattered. He needed to protect her even from his own dark desires. "We need to stop," he whispered hoarsely. Erica nodded slowly. Her own breathing matched his frantic pace. She rested, her head against his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart beneath the ruined fabric. Lucian stood up effortlessly while keeping her securely in his arms. He carried her down the dark hallway and into his massive bedroom. He laid her gently onto the center of the bed. He stripped off his ruined shirt, leaving it on the floor before climbing into the bed beside her. He pulled her back, flush against his warm, bare chest. He wrapped his heavy arms securely around her waist. Erica closed her eyes. She let the steady rhythm of his heartbeat lull her into a deep, dreamless sleep. The terrifying monster of the underworld finally found peace holding the woman he swore to protect. The heavy rubber tablet buzzed violently against the nightstand. Lucian woke instantly. He rolled out of bed, leaving the warmth of Erica behind. He grabbed the glowing device. His face turned to stone as he listened to Enzo shouting over the sound of heavy gunfire. The Falcone family realized they could not touch the Don in his high tower. They chose the softer target instead. They launched a massive coordinated assault on the pediatric ward. "I have to go," Lucian stated. He pulled on his dark clothes with terrifying speed. Enzo is pinned down in the hallway outside Toby's room. "I am taking every available man to flank them." Erica sat up, clutching the sheets to her chest. Panic threatened to drown her. "You promised he was safe." "He will be," Lucian swore. He strapped his heavy shoulder holster into place. "The penthouse is on absolute lockdown. The elevators are disabled. You stay in this room until I return." He kissed her hard on the mouth before sprinting out the door. The heavy magnetic locks slammed shut, echoing through the silent apartment. Erica grabbed the tablet. She watched the chaotic security feed from the hospital. The screen showed smoke and flashing lights. Heavily armed men exchanged fire in the sterile white corridors. Enzo stood planted firmly in front of Toby's door, refusing to yield a single inch. The tablet screen suddenly flickered and went entirely black. Erica gasped. She tapped the glass frantically, but the feed remained completely dead. She sat in the dark bedroom, trembling violently. A soft metallic click echoed from the main living area. Erica froze. The elevators were supposed to be disabled. Someone had bypassed the security grid. Heavy, stealthy footsteps moved across the marble floor of the foyer. Lucian took his best men to the hospital. He left the penthouse vulnerable. The hospital attack was a brutal distraction to draw the monster out of his lair. Erica slipped silently out of the bed. She crept out into the dark hallway. A shadowy figure moved near the kitchen holding a long weapon. She remembered the hidden panel in the living room wall. She watched Lucian press his hand to the scanner earlier. She prayed he left the secondary biometric lock disengaged. She moved like a ghost along the wall. She reached the hidden seam and pressed her palm against the cold metal. The panel slid open with a soft hiss. The intruder whipped around, aiming his weapon toward the sound. Erica reached blindly into the dark armory. Her hand closed around the cold, heavy grip of a handgun. She pulled it out, raising it with both hands just as the hitman leveled his rifle at her chest. She did not hesitate. She thought of Toby trapped in the hospital. She thought of Lucian bleeding for her. She squeezed the trigger. The deafening blast shattered the silence of the penthouse. The intruder fell backward, crashing heavily into the glass dining table. Erica stood shaking in the darkness. She kept the heavy weapon raised. She stared at the fallen threat. She finally proved she belonged in his violent world. She was no longer just a damsel in distress. She was the queen of the syndicate. Erica stood in the center of the living room. The glass dining table lay shattered on the floor. A Falcone hitman lay motionless among the broken shards. Erica stood directly over him. She held the heavy black handgun with both hands. Her arms trembled slightly, but her eyes remained fierce and determined. Lucian stared at the incredible woman before him. He expected to find her hiding in absolute terror. He expected to find a broken damsel. He instead found a warrior. She did not just survive his brutal world, she conquered it. He stepped forward slowly. He gently reached out and took the weapon from her tight grip. He engaged the safety and set the gun aside. He looked deep into her beautiful eyes. The terrified girl was gone completely. The queen of his empire stood in her place. Lucian pulled her fiercely against his chest. He buried his face in her hair. He inhaled her sweet scent deeply. He wrapped his powerful arms around her waist, holding her incredibly tight. "You belong to me and I belong to you," he whispered hoarsely against her neck. Erica dropped her head against his shoulder. She closed her eyes and finally let herself breathe. She wrapped her own arms around his solid frame. "I know," she answered softly. They stood together in the dark penthouse. They were bound entirely by blood and loyalty. She accepted her dangerous, new reality and her dark crown without a single regret. Lucian lifted her effortlessly into his arms. Erica wrapped her legs tightly around his waist. He carried her away from the shattered glass and the violent reality of the foyer. He walked down the dark hallway and carried her into the absolute safety of his massive bedroom. He laid her gently onto the center of the bed. The shadows of the room surrounded them completely. He followed her down onto the mattress. His heavy weight felt grounding and entirely safe. He kissed her with a desperate and bruising hunger. The adrenaline of the terrifying night finally boiled over into pure, intense passion. Erica met his fire completely. Her hands frantically tugged at the buttons of his ruined shirt. She desperately needed to feel his warm skin against hers. Lucian stripped away the remnants of his clothing. He gently helped her out of her own garments. The cool air of the room touched her bare skin for only a brief second before his intense burning heat replaced it. He worshipped every inch of her. He traced the soft curves of her body with his rough, calloused hands. His dark eyes promised absolute protection and endless devotion. He kissed her deeply, erasing the lingering shadows of her fear. Erica pulled him even closer. She yielded entirely to the dangerous man who had come into her life so unexpectedly and so ruthlessly to save her and Toby. They moved together in the quiet sanctuary of the penthouse. The violent world outside ceased to exist entirely. They forged a permanent and unbreakable bond in the dark. She gave him her whole heart, and he gave her his absolute adoration. The warm tropical breeze swept across the pristine white sand. Erica stood on the balcony of the private island villa. She watched the crystal-clear turquoise water sparkling under the bright sun. Toby ran along the shoreline below. He looked completely healthy. The pale, fragile boy from the sterile hospital room was gone entirely. He laughed loudly, pointing out toward the rolling waves. A small pod of wild dolphins jumped through the surf right in front of him. Enzo stood, a few feet away from the boy. The massive underboss wore dark sunglasses and a bright floral shirt over his hidden weapons. Enzo smiled and watched the boy jump up and down. Toby loved his new family. He absolutely adored the giant men who kept him safe. Lucian stepped out onto the balcony behind her. He wrapped his strong arms around her waist and pulled her back against his solid chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder. They both watched Toby happily chasing the waves. He looks so happy, Lucian murmured softly against her ear. He is, Erica replied, leaning her weight entirely against the man she loved. We both are. Lucian turned her gently around to face him. The lethal coldness that used to define his dark eyes was completely gone whenever he looked at her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He flipped it open, revealing a massive, flawless diamond ring catching the bright island sunlight. Erica gasped softly and covered her mouth with her hands. You brought light into my dark world, Erica. Lucian said, his voice thick with raw emotion. You gave me a family and a purpose beyond the violence. I want to spend the rest of my life protecting you both. Marry me. Share this life with me forever. Tears of absolute joy spilled down her cheeks. She did not hesitate for a single second. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Forever.